It is the battle royale. Today we talk about Preterite versus Imperfect. Which one do we choose? We know that they both talk about the past, but what we want to look at today is which one do we choose for the meaning that we want to achieve. Place your bets. Here we go. You will notice here that we have way more rules for the imperfect than we do for the preterite. Let's start with the most simple one. We use the imperfect to talk about one very simple thing, and that is age. How old you are, how old you were, how old someone else was. In your notes where you just wrote age, you're going to write this example. I was 1. The way we say that in Spanish is we take tener and we put in the imperfect. Tenía un año. We also only use the imperfect to talk about time. So what that means is we would say eran las 8:22. Make sure you're paying special attention, though, to that notion of it was, not it is. It was that time, usually when something happened, and we'll get to that later. The third thing we use the imperfect to talk about is descriptions. So the way someone or something was, and for this, oftentimes we're going to use era. Let's say we want to describe Robert Wadlow, who was the tallest man, like ever. He was 8 feet and 11 inches. Super tall, certainly taller than me. But if I'm describing him and I want to say he was, I'm going to use the imperfect there. Anytime I'm describing someone, so I'd say Robert era el hombre más alto. So anytime I'm describing, I'm going to use the imperfect. In this case, era to say was. He was a pretty tall dude. Fourth, we use the imperfect to talk about things we used to do. In other words, repeated actions, things we like to do again and again and again. Or even if we didn't like them, we still did them repeatedly or habitually. This is where we can get into a double meaning for English, but really a singular meaning for Spanish. So to express the idea that, like, when you were a kid, or when I was a kid, I used to watch Sesame Street, or like I watched Sesame Street, but the implication is I did it again and again and again. It wasn't like this one-time deal. We're going to use the imperfect, so we would say miraba Sesame Street. I did you? Probably. I think like everyone does. So miraba gives the impression that it happened again and again and again. It was my habitual action. The last thing we use the imperfect to do is talk about what was happening or what were happening, I guess you could also say. This one is a little bit tricky, so I'm going to give you an example really fast. But we're going to touch on it a little bit more after the preterite too. Take a look at this poor guy in a boat. If we want to talk about the background, we want to describe what was happening before, obviously, there was quite the alligator attack. We're going to use the imperfect to describe the background information. What was already happening when the attack occurred? So this dude was fishing. The verb to fish is pescar. So we could just say, él pescaba. He was fishing. And then when we get to the preterite, I'm going to tell you about how to say when the animal attacked. We could also say, and maybe you know this already, él, and this is a lot more literal, estaba pescando. He was, and then we have that fishing ing, which you already know. Either one is fine. A lot of times, native English speakers like that one better because it's more like how we say it in English. But either one is good. Now let's move on to the preterite. I'm only going to give you 2 rules for the preterite. We use the preterite to talk about single events. So one time only, or events that are happened a stated number of times. So we're going to begin by talking about a very defining and singular moment of your life, the time when you were born. You were only born once. It happened one number of times. And even if I don't say it, it's implied in the meaning, right? So to say, I was born, the verb to be born is nacer. That's a good one. That only happened once. So we're going to use the preterite to talk about things that only happened one time. And you're going to say, nací. And that's it. That's all I was born. It's totally okay that in English it's 3 words and in Spanish just one. Much more efficient language, don't you think? But now let's talk about an event that happened a stated number of times. Let's say you want to say, I went to Disney World 5 times. Voila, here we have Disney World. I went there 5 times. How do we say I went? Fui a Disney World 5 veces. Now I'm using the preterite here because I'm giving you a distinct number of times. How many times did I go? 5. If I were to say like, oh, we always went to Disney World during spring break, then I'd use the imperfect. Are you sensing the difference? If I give you a specific number, you know that specific number says use the preterite. So perhaps right now you are feeling overwhelmed by all these 7 rules. That's okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you some hint words that are going to be your clue, like, oh my God, that tells me I'm automatically going to use the imperfect, or, well, I know I'm going to use the preterite here. And hopefully that will make you freak out less. These are phrases or hint words for when to use the imperfect. If you're reading something, it's a sentence, and you're not sure which one to use, or you're writing something, you can use these, and that's automatically going to tell you, wow, I'm going to use that imperfect, that aba or ia ending. But you might not know what all of them mean, so let's make sure that we do know. Starting with cada. Cada means every. So cada dia, mes, o año, every day, month, or year. A veces, sometimes. De vez en cuando, once in a while. Todos los días, every day. And a really good solid hint word, siempre, always. Now let's move over to the preterite. All of these preterite words are hints that something happened just one time or it happened at this very specific time, and they're going to tell us, okay, here we use the preterite. So like ayer, yesterday. If you're telling me about yesterday, chances are there was only one yesterday. Anoche, same idea, last night. El or la, you could put lots of things there. Dia, mes, año, semana, pasado or pasada. So if you want to tell me last week, you'd say la semana pasada to say last week. El año pasado, last year. Hace however many años, you'd put a number there. That means it's been so long since something happened. And my personal favorite, because it's good for stories, suddenly, de repente. Makes it super exciting that things suddenly happened. Now it's challenge time. Remember that picture of that guy riding on his boat and then the alligator came, or the crocodile, or I don't know, whatever. At the bottom of this paper, I want you to write this sentence that I just wrote in English. He was fishing when the animal attacked. And this is what I want to check in for tomorrow to see if you kind of really get this concept. We have 2 verbs here, right? Fishing and attacked. The animal attacked. What I want to see when I check this in, and again, I'm just looking for the English, you're going to put an I next to the verb that's going to take the imperfect, and a P next to the verb that's going to take the preterite. And the way you're going to figure that out is what's background, what's describing? That's going to be the imperfect. And what's the action? What's the one time only? That's going to be the preterite. And I'm going to check that in tomorrow. Okay, hasta luego, amigos.